I had grown accustomed to the sweet scent of denial that wafted through the air whenever my family gathered. The aroma of roasted chicken filled the dining room, mixing with the clinking of cutlery and the sound of laughter, forging an invisible wall between me and the warmth of the table, as if it were designed to keep me at bay. It was the day of my brother's new business launch, a momentous occasion filled with excitement that had been brewing for weeks, as he had been showered with compliments and encouragement at every turn. The evening sun filtered through the kitchen window, casting a golden hue that further illuminated his shining achievements while leaving my shadow a dark, desolate corner. I stood in that corner, grappling with my own burden, feeling as if I were an intruder in my own home. "Amelia, would you help set the table?" My mother's voice cut through the melody of chaos, pulling me from my spiraling thoughts. I nodded dutifully, lifting plates with a practiced grace, but inside I was aching. Every time I would help with these routines, it felt like putting another piece of the puzzle together in a family portrait that did not include me. My hands trembled slightly as I placed forks and spoons down, whispering prayers beneath my breath that no one would notice the discontent simmering inside me. "Mom, can you believe the bank just approved my business loan?" My brother's voice rang out like a triumphant bell, sweet music to our parents' ears. Claps and cheers erupted from the gathering as I placed a glass tumbler down harder than intended, the sound sharp and jarring. "Isn't it incredible, Amelia? I've been saying yes to every challenge thrown my way, and look where I am now," he proclaimed, his laughter riding the wave of pride woven into the fabric of this evening. "Yeah, amazing," I replied, forcing a smile that felt foreign on my lips. The taste of bitterness lingered at the back of my throat, like the dry remnants of an unfinished meal. The more they celebrated him, the more I felt like an outsider stuck in their idyllic world. "Congratulations," I managed, my voice slightly weak from the weight of my own frustrations. "Oh, Amelia, you always know how to be supportive," my mother exclaimed, oblivious to the storm inside me. "You should take a page from your brother's book. You could really use some of that positivity." My heart sank, the words piercing through me like daggers. Why was it so easy for them to dismiss my struggles? It felt astoundingly unfair. "It must feel good to have that kind of backing," I mumbled, feeling the blood rush to my cheeks, not from embarrassment but fueled by the flame of resentment that had been growing for years. "I mean, how fortunate to have our parents invest in your dreams and ambitions." As I spoke, I could hear a tinge of sarcasm slip through, a flicker of rebellion that I recognized all too well but was always afraid to embrace. "What do you mean by that?" he shot back, his brow furrowing slightly. There was a momentary hush, a quiet tension that hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. I could feel the weight of the room shift. They were all looking at me, waiting for an answer. My heart thumped loudly in my chest, the pressure of 1,000 words battling for release. "I mean, it must be nice to have a safety net. Some of us actually have to wrestle with the harshness of reality." I could practically feel the heat radiating off my skin as I said it, wishing I could take those words back the moment they left my mouth. "Amelia, that's not fair," my father intervened, frowning at me as if I had just defiled a sacred family tradition. "We all work hard for what we have. Your brother didn't just get the loan handed to him. He earned it." The gravity of his disappointment felt like a boulder pressing down on my chest. "Sure, Dad," I replied tightly, my hands clenched as I felt my nails dig into my skin. "And I guess my 2 jobs and $20,000 in debt don't count as working hard." The cracking of my voice didn't escape me, and for a moment, I thought I might start to cry. But I steeled myself, looking towards the window as if the setting sun would offer me a refuge from the chaos inside. "Is this really the time for this?" my brother asked, dropping his upbeat facade, eyes piercing through mine with confusion and something else hurt. "I'm trying to celebrate my achievement here." "Celebrate? It's easy to celebrate when the path to success is paved with gold while the rest of us are trudging through mud." I spat the words, releasing the frustration that had built up like a pressure cooker inside me. I could see my family's expressions change, shifting from elation to concern, and it only fueled me more. "Amelia." My mother's voice trembled slightly as my brother merely stood there, his mouth agape in disbelief. "This is your brother's big night. Please, let's focus on him today." The plea from my mother was filled with an urgency that felt borderline desperate, yet all it did was tighten the coil of anger inside me. "Focus on him." I shook my head, frustration bubbling over. "Focus on him while I drown in debt, while I'm overworked and underappreciated." "I'm starting to think my accomplishments do not exist in your world," I shouted, the words spilling over like a raging river unable to be contained. Amelia, stop, my brother finally said, lifting his hands to halt the oncoming storm. You don't have to keep comparing yourself to me. We all have our paths. He was trying to soften the blow. I could see it in his eyes. Oh, please, don't you think I'm aware of that? You're the one who has been dictated by our parents since day one, while I am the forgotten one. My voice trembled with each word, the pain spilling forth. You get everything handed to you, and I have to scrape and claw just to keep afloat. Why can't you just be happy for me? He asked, frustration creeping into his voice. I could feel the tears threatening to spill from my own eyes, but I fought against them, holding my ground, desperately wanting to be heard. Happy. It's hard to be happy when you feel invisible, I replied, my voice breaking slightly. Inside, I was lost, torn between the desire to scream and the need to withdraw. The sting of his achievements felt like a thorn, a reminder that I was always in the background. I'm tired of feeling this way, I admitted, voice quiet now, almost aching. Well, maybe it's time to change that, he snapped back, and I could see the anger boiling behind his facade. Maybe it's time I stop existing only to support your dreams. I flared up again. The kitchen was enveloped in an electric tension that was almost unbearable. My mother suddenly stepped between us, the embodiment of our family dynamics unraveling. Both of you stop it. The command rang through the room. I could see the slight tremor in her hands, the way she clutched the table for support. This is not what we wanted for tonight. We should be celebrating. Celebrating? I shot back, disbelief coating each word. I am not sure what we're celebrating at all. A perfect little world that excludes me. Sometimes you need to find joy in other people's achievements, Amelia. My father's voice cut through sharply, cutting straight to the center of my chest. It is not always about you. Not always about me. Oh, you've said that enough times for me to feel absolutely invisible. The wave of emotions threatened to submerge me. I turned my head away, tears threatening to spill. Take a breath, please, my mother pleaded, her tone wavering. Sure, Mom, I replied, forcing a tight smile. Let me just breathe through my $20,000 in debt while I serve the golden child. I felt the sharpness of my anger intensify with every word I spoke. I knew it was wrong, but the pain was too raw to bottle back up, too stifling to dismiss. There it goes again. This is why nobody talks about the deep stuff, Amelia. My brother's voice sliced through the air. You make everything feel like you are the victim. Before I could respond to him, I felt a wave of resentment swell again. Because the truth was clear. I had been living in his shadow for years, a shadow that seemed to elongate with every accolade he received while I struggled. The thought felt like a knife twice buried in my heart. I might burst into tears, but anger coursed through my veins instead. Suit yourself, I said, steeling my resolve. But I will no longer stand by while you bask in the glow of favoritism. I'm done being the invisible sister. I turned on my heels, storming out of the dining room, my mind racing, heart pounding, feeling the familiar mix of rage and despair, but also perhaps something else. A seed of change had been planted. I was done living like this, forgotten and disdained. Maybe tonight had been the boiling point, the prelude to my own comeback. The door slammed behind me, echoing down the hall. For a second, I envisioned the laughter and applause continuing without me, the celebrations erupting around my brother while my absence sank into the fragmented corners of their awareness. And it hurt, deep down, but together with that hurt was courage bubbling beneath, a furious spark igniting in shadows. I thought of the mounting debts and dark corners I had walked alone for too long. Tonight was just the beginning, and for the first time, I felt a thrill in thinking about turning the tides. I could not shake the metallic taste of betrayal that lingered in my mouth as I leaned back against the wall of my bedroom, nestled in the center of Evergreen Valley. I felt as if I could still hear the soft chime of my mother's phone, the way the glowing screen had beckoned me like some cursed treasure hiding truths I had never wanted to uncover. $500 a week was a staggering amount of money, especially when my brother had never once mentioned he needed financial help. He had a steady job, an opportunity to make his mark in the world. Yet there I was, lugging a mountain of debts, my own responsibilities left to rot like unclaimed letters. The walls of my room felt constricting, the air stale as I tore my gaze away from the phone on my desk, a black screen that felt endlessly silent now, holding onto its secrets like a vault. I could almost hear my mother's voice, soft and melodic, talking down to me as she always had, masking her parental favoritism in layers of concern. Amelia, sweetheart, How are you ever going to manage?" She would say, her eyes filled with a condescending mix of pity and urgency as she watched her little girl drown in the chaos of adulthood. "You should really be careful with money. I worry about you." She'd slip in just enough suggestion that I needed to do better, to try harder, to be more like him. As if directly comparing me to my brother wasn't a dagger that had shimmered in the light ever since we were kids. "I have to figure this out," I muttered under my breath, a mantra rising against the walls of my mind that were closing in. I pushed through the dark shroud of confusion wrapping around my thoughts, the swirling storm of emotions caught between indignation and sorrow. With resolve, I swung my legs over the edge of the bed, the wood creaking beneath my weight. I felt a gnawing determination settle deep in my gut. This would mean war. "What are you doing?" I whispered to myself as I reached for my laptop. It took a second for my fingers to find their rhythm on the keyboard, but once they did, I felt electric. I logged into my bank account, determined to gather every piece of evidence I could find. Each click echoed in the silence of my room, a reminder of the ticking clock and the impending confrontation I was gearing up for. I opened the browser and remembered the phone call from my mother a few days before, her disinterested tone as she had informed me about my late payment due dates. "Amy, you really need to sort it out, honey," she had said, her voice dripping with disinterested concern. "I can't keep bailing you out." The words stung, and her hypocritical concern fueled the smoldering fire within me. Had she forgotten that those words were easier to say from the comfort of her suffocating financial support gifted to my brother? "Okay, let's see," I mumbled, racing through the transactions one by one, the collected evidence of last month's installments filled with sordid surprises. I quickly opened a document, typing notes furiously as I referenced so many receipts, my face set in fierce concentration. "This is insane. She really did send him $500 every single week." I could almost hear the coins clattering against one another, a disrespectful melody reverberating with every keystroke. Hours passed with my eyes glued to the screen, blood pulsing in my temples as I scrolled through the list, digging deeper into my history to see what else I could uncover. My heart raced with each successful search for a trail of deception, a bank transfer here, a text message there. Soon I felt like a detective unraveling a web of financial wrongdoing. An audio file of my mother leaving a voicemail to my brother to reassure him his money would be in the bank soon solidified my mounting rage. How dare they forsake me in silence while he lived a charmed life? It was hardly fair. "Amelia, you really let things slip, don't you?" I imitated her tired tone, staring at my reflection in the screen, determination now bleeding into reckless ambition. "What would it take for you to grow up?" I could practically hear the faux concern dripping through the space I inhabited like mist curling around my senses. As I continued gathering my evidence, I felt a strange blend of empowerment in looking deeply into their choices, veering from the naive, trusting daughter they had raised. I was tired of being the afterthought, the collateral damage of their favoritism. Now, gears shifted. I was taking aim. I shut my laptop, rubbing my eyes as the blue light faded from view. Fatigue washed over me, but I sensed adrenaline still coursing through my veins. I needed a plan. I needed to confront them, not just my mother, but my brother, too. After all, it took two to tango in this concert of deception and familial betrayal. "Time to level the playing field," I muttered to myself, letting a wry smile slip through as I imagined how they would respond to my revelations. It would feel gloriously satisfying to throw their words back at them, to watch this facade they had built come crashing down around them. "Maybe I will see them in the morning, maybe we can talk," I murmured, and the word talk dripped with sarcasm, excitement buzzing beneath my skin like a pulse of electricity. The nerve of my mother would either push me away or bring us closer. I knew this. Deep within, tiny sparks of rebellion danced nimbly around my heart. I licked my dry lips and ran my fingers nervously through my hair, feeling the weight of my resolve, galvanizing me. Evening drifted into night, shadows stretching across my dimly lit room as I sank into thought again. The soft creak of the floorboards pulled me back, a gentle reminder of the normal routine surrounding me. The darkness outside settled in, yet my room felt illuminated by revenge, bitter and sweet. I let it wash over me, reveling in the incandescent fury that had turned from anguish to a brilliant fire that would no longer be ignored. "Tomorrow," I breathed, nodding decisively to my own spirit. "Tomorrow they will know." I closed my eyes, envisioning the confrontation ahead, my vision of clarity flickering like a candle in the lonely dark, illuminating me as I stepped onto the battlefield for what I would reclaim, a long overdue sense of worthiness and belonging. With a mind brimming with possibilities, I fell into an unsettled sleep, the specter of the future looming on the horizon of dawn waiting patiently to make its entrance. My dreams were filled with the stolen glances of judgment from my mother, the disappointed silence of my brother rendered speechless. I knew in my deepest essence that I was done with the shadows. This was the beginning of my retribution. I could feel the tension radiating in the air as each second ticked by, my heart thumping in my chest like a war drum. The clock on the wall seemed to amplify the silence, each tick stretching the moment of anticipation painfully thin. I had rehearsed this confrontation countless times, but nothing could prepare me for the reality of actually facing them, my family, and the truth that could not be hidden any longer. This was it. The family meeting I had organized felt like a stage set for a dramatic play. The roles were set, the lines memorized, but I held no script. I could taste the bitterness of betrayal on my tongue, sharp and stinging, as I approached my parents and brother who were settling into their chairs, their faces a mixture of curiosity and unease. As I walked to the center of the room, my mind raced with all the memories that piled up over the years, the moments of neglect, the waves of favoritism washing over my brother while I stood in the shadows, unnoticed, unheard. Every check my brother received, every inch of support from my parents that I was denied, felt like knives digging deeper into the scars of my self-worth. The glossy papers I'd laid out on the table mirrored the shattered fragments of my life that I was about to reveal. I inhaled deeply, the scent of worn wood and faint lavender wafting in from the nearby vase, but there was no comfort to be found in it today. Only a heavy fragrance of confrontation hung in the air. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steadier than I felt, despite the tremor in my hands as I arranged the papers in front of me. "I know this is not easy, but there are things we need to talk about, things that have been boiling beneath the surface for far too long." My gaze flicked from my mother, whose eyes had begun to glisten with uncertainty, to my father, who looked down at the floor, his face wrinkling in shame. "I can't believe it's come to this." My brother's voice sliced through the initial hush like a knife, sounding shrill and defensive. His arms were crossed tightly over his chest, a familiar posture of defiance. "What are you talking about? You're being dramatic." I felt a flash of anger but tempered it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. "Dramatic? No, this is about facts." I gestured at the papers spanning the table like a map of deceit I had spent weeks uncovering. "These are transfers, checks, all evidence of how you and Mom and Dad chose to support him over me." I pointed at my brother, who stiffened under my scrutiny, his face turning crimson. "While I struggled to make ends meet, I learned you were receiving all this money behind my back." My mother's face paled as she glanced between us, confusion and guilt etched into her features. "Amelia, sweetheart, there must be a misunderstanding. Your brother needed the help. He was." "No." I interrupted, the word bursting from my lips as my heartbeat pounded in my ears. "It's not a misunderstanding. You chose favorites, and you did it under the guise of help." My pulse surged as I recalled sleepless nights spent wrestling with bills and feeling invisible in the home that was meant to be a sanctuary. "Do you know what it's like to feel that you will never be good enough for your family? Do you understand the relentless anxiety of financial insecurity?" Each word escaped my lips like a spear aimed directly at their hearts. I could see my father shift, his shoulders slumping slightly as he slowly raised his eyes. "Amelia, I had no idea you were struggling so much," he said, his voice strained as if it pained him to speak. "Why didn't you ask us for help?" The disappointment I felt was a weight pressing down on me. "Did you seriously just ask me that? Asking for help implies you have to want to help in the first place. Why would I approach you when all I've seen is you enabling him?" I pointed again at my brother, who remained tense, practically boiling over behind his veneer of disbelief. "What am I to you? A ghost? A backup plan?" He opened his mouth, the words fumbling on his tongue. "I wasn't trying to. You never considered how this affected me." I cut him off, feeling the fury rise like an unstoppable wave. "All the times I looked up to you, admired you, only to find that you were the one getting the support while I was left to struggle alone. During the tough times, why didn't anyone notice what I was going through?" "Amelia, please," my mother interjected softly, her voice breaking slightly. "We didn't realize you felt this way." There was a small tremor in her voice, as though the reality I was confronting them with was not one she'd expected to come to light. "We thought you were managing just fine on your own." Fine on my own, I wanted to scream. The very thought made the bile rise in my throat. "That's just it, isn't it?" I said, my voice sharp and edged with indignation. "You assumed I was fine because I didn't complain. But how could I complain when I felt so utterly alone? You never listened. You chose to look away." The thick silence in the room settled like an uninvited guest. My father cleared his throat. "Amelia, it is never easy to discuss finances as a family, and I see we have failed to communicate openly. But please, what's done is done. Do you really think we did this to hurt you? Didn't you? You didn't even think I deserved to know about the money being sent under the table." I retaliated, pointing a finger towards the files on the table, where documents lay silently, each one a reminder of betrayal. "This is not only about money for me. This is about trust. You all turned your backs when I needed you most. I've looked up to you as a family unit, but all I see are fragments of hypocrisy." "Hypocrisy? That's a strong word," my brother remarked, his voice wavering. The anger on his face ebbed into confusion. I watched as he struggled to comprehend the situation, seeing my perspective rambling through the chaos of his own guilt. "Amelia, you're making this sound worse than it is." "Worse than it is?" I repeated incredulously, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. "If you even remotely think that I'm exaggerating my reality, then you've missed every point I've made. Look at the paper. Look at what you've been given. While I stood there, applauding your achievements, fighting my own battles alone, convinced that the love of my family would be enough to pull me through. Yet each time I clapped, I was doing it in the shadow of your unearned fortune." Their faces shifted, tones changing as the tide turned. My brother stared as the color drained from his face, realization starting to dawn upon him like sunlight breaking through heavy clouds. "But I never wanted to. Intention or not, here we are," I said forcefully, feeling emboldened as I pressed on. "You all knew I was struggling. The moments you decided not to mention the financial help I could have used were the moments you chose to keep me small, contained, and once again, reminded me I wasn't worth reinforcing." My father finally spoke, this time with a voice heavy and laden with regret. "Amelia, I can't say this is easy to hear, and I'm sorry that you felt unwelcome in your own home. I should have recognized the signs. We'll do better moving forward." It felt like an empty promise echoing off the walls of my resentment. I needed something that was more than just words. I needed a profound acknowledgement of the gap they created, and that realization barely brushed the surface of the hurt I had swallowed for years. My brother was nodding reluctantly, but this was so much bigger than acknowledgement. I wanted them to understand the gravity of their actions, the way their choices had twisted my self-perception into knots. But before that moment could settle, my mother whispered something to my father, urgency creeping into her voice. "He has to understand we did what we thought was best for you both." "No, truly, you did," I exclaimed, feeling the desperation clawing to the surface. "You failed to see me." With every sentence, I felt a flicker of hope igniting like a match against the shadows surrounding me. "For too long, I let your actions turn my worth into a question. But no more. Today is not just a confrontation, but a declaration. It's time I reclaim my voice." My brother looked visibly shaken, and I knew this was the moment. With each passing second, I felt lighter, the weight of their disappointments slipping through my fingers like grains of sand. I could almost taste the freedom that awaited me, a life not colored by their decisions. "Whether you listen or acknowledge it, I will not wait for your approval anymore," I stated firmly, feeling the tremor in my voice morph into strength. "I refuse to be defined by your favoritism or your favoritism alone." My family didn't reply right away. Their shock hung in the air while my heart surged with an emotion I had held onto for too long. For the first time in years, I chose to stand tall amidst the chaos I had revealed. I let the truth wash over me, and in that space of vulnerability, I embraced the flicker of hope that grew stronger in my chest. I had exposed the raw nerve of that hidden betrayal, and as chaos unfolded around me, I was finally ready to reclaim the story of my life in the days that followed my confrontation. The unease within my family felt palpable, like the heavy silence before a storm. The walls of our home, once filled with laughter and comfort, now seemed to echo with guilt and regret. I watched as my parents navigated the days with a sense of loss that was both familiar and strange. The mornings felt heavier as they tiptoed around each other, avoiding eye contact like stubborn ghosts roaming the halls. I had never seen my mother's smile fade so completely, nor had I heard my father's laughter, which used to cascade through the house, dampened into nervous chuckles. It was disheartening, bitterly sweet, and though I was aware of their discomfort, a small part of me reveled in it. Yet I didn't want to poke at the wounds. I wanted to play the long game. The evening of the family dinner arrived, and every nerve in my body was taut like the strings of a violin, vibrating with anticipation. I could smell the remnants of the roasted chicken that lingered in the air, a scent both comforting and ominous. To any outside observer, it may have appeared like any ordinary family dinner, but inside my chest, a storm brewed. I chose to wear a soft gray sweater, its cozy fabric a stark contrast to the whirlwind of emotion within me. It helped ground me, or at least I hoped it would. As we gathered around the dinner table, the clinking of forks against plates filled the professional silence that had settled in. My mother served the chicken with her usual grace, but her hands trembled, and the subtle flicker of her eyes told me she was on the verge of breaking down. "Amelia, do you want more?" she asked, her voice deceptively cheerful, almost fragile. "No, thank you, Mom," I replied, biting the inside of my cheek to suppress a smirk. It felt oddly satisfying to not only be at this table, but to understand that it was not the same family meal I had endured in the past. This time the scales had tipped, and it sent shivers through me. My father cleared his throat, the sound heavy and foreboding, like the peal of distant thunder. "We need to talk," he said, studiously avoiding my gaze. I could see my brother fidgeting out of the corner of my eye, nervously twirling his silver fork between his fingers. I knew he was dreading whatever was to come, and I took a small moment to savor that knowledge. "I think we should just get right to it," my mother added, her voice trembling just enough to give away the emotional stakes. "We've been unfair. We see that now." The admission hung in the air like a bitter pill, one I had been anticipating for what felt like years. I forced myself to remain impassive, even as excitement bubbled within. "We want to apologize for putting you in a corner, Amelia," Dad spoke, each word measured as he glanced at me, momentarily breaking his wall of avoidance. There was a raw honesty in his voice, an unfamiliar vulnerability that made the air thick. "It was never our intention to play favorites, to create division in our family. We thought we were doing what was best. We see now that it was misguided." "Misguided? You mean it was cruel?" I interjected, unable to contain my response, my heart beating rapidly. "You've made it clear how little I mattered in this family, haven't you? A simple apology can't erase all those years." My father winced, visibly hurt by my words. "Amelia, I understand you feel that way, and it's justified, but we are here to make it right." I saw him swallow hard, the struggle evident in his features. "We have decided to take back the financial support we gave your brother." His words pierced through the air, crackling with energy. "What?" my brother exclaimed, his fork clattering onto the plate with a sharp ping that cut through the tension like a knife. His face was a canvas of disbelief and rage, the hue of his skin transforming as palpable anger overshadowed his shock. "You can't be serious, after everything I've done for this family." "It's not that simple. You must understand," my mother insisted, her words tumbling out in a desperate rush as if they might save him from his impending downfall. "This is about equality. You have both been given advantages, but Amelia, she needs our support more right now." "Support?" He scoffed, the scorn heavy in his words. "She doesn't deserve anything. Just because you feel guilty now doesn't change what you've done. It doesn't matter if I deserve it or not. This isn't about me. It's about you understanding the concept of giving and receiving," I said, feeling the adrenaline power me more than anger. "For once, maybe you could step outside your own world and see how this affects the rest of us." His eyes darted between my parents and me, wild like a cornered animal. "How could you do this? I've worked hard. I earned what I got." His voice rose with each utterance, a tide of fury spilling into the room and crashing against my mother and father, who exchanged worried glances. "Hard work isn't enough when you're not being honest about what you did to get there," I shot back, refusing to let him regain the upper hand. "You didn't earn it fairly. You were given every opportunity while the rest of us struggled just to keep our heads above water." "You want to talk about work? I fought tooth and nail to survive in what has felt like a lonely battle for far too long." The shifts in atmosphere were dizzying, the air thick with emotions that were so raw it felt like they could slice through the table. I could feel my heart race, the truth reverberating in me, a feeling of freedom unfurling. In this moment, I was letting go of the burden of resentment I clutched for so long, the darkness that had pulled me under all these years. Maybe you should have thought of that before tossing money to the golden child, I shouted, feeling the heat of the words while a flicker of understanding crossed my parents' faces, almost like an unspoken communication that the tide was turning. I can't believe this. I'm your son. I deserve to be supported. I've done everything you asked. He snapped angrily, the fire behind his words collapsing into a desperate need for validation that he had so recklessly mismanaged in the past. We know we've failed you, my father replied, finally letting the emotion bleed through, his voice thick and heavy with regret. But this time we will not be catering to unfairness. We've sold the family home to pay off Amelia's debts, and you are no longer going to receive what you once got. It's only just. The look on my brother's face was priceless. His eyes widened, disbelief morphing into raw anger that felt electric. I could see all the carefully maintained walls shattering around him like glass. This was it. This was his reckoning. You can't take that from me. Do you know what that house meant to all of us? It was our home. His voice cracked, tears of frustration welling up. And how many homes did you build for Amelia? I retorted, the words spilling from my lips before I could catch them. How many times did you ignore her voice while giving everything to your favorite child? The atmosphere shifted, morphing from confrontation into something deeper. My mother, normally a pillar of strength, let out a choked sob, the sound wrapping itself around the tension and forcing us to confront the reality we had all created. We were wrong, and we know that now. But we want to start over, to build something where both of you feel equal again. As the tension built, I felt a wave of satisfaction wash over me, a rush of adrenaline surging through my body as relief washed through the room. This was more than a victory. It was validation, finally becoming free of the shackles that had bound me to this family. I could finally breathe again, pulling myself out of the muck where I had been buried for years. It was bittersweet, this forced empathy spilling from my parents, but I embraced it like a long-lost friend. As I stood up to leave the table and my brother remained silent and seething, my parents' helpless look of remorse played behind me like actors in a bad show. I walked past my brother and almost smirked, teasing the corners of my lips. In that moment, I felt untouchable, almost triumphant. "Don't walk past me like that, Amelia," he said, his voice laced with threat. "You think you've won, but this isn't over. You have no idea what I can do." "Oh, I know exactly what you can do," I replied without turning back, my voice steady. "You've shown me that already." As I made my way to my room, I couldn't help but feel a shift in our family dynamic, one that felt almost tangible in the air. This was my moment, and for the first time in forever, I truly felt empowered. Weeks passed since that fateful dinner, where the air had been thick with unspoken words, and the weight of that long-awaited confrontational truth hung over everything like a cloud that refused to dissipate. My once crushing debts shrank, finally sliding away piece by piece, like ice cubes melting in a glass of warm water. There was liberation in that process, a sensation mirroring the breath of fresh air filling my lungs for the first time in so long. I began to embrace my independence, not just financially, but emotionally as well, breaking chains that had held me captive for years. I remember the evening light slanting through my window, casting patterns on the floor as I sat at my small kitchen table, the surface cluttered with scribbles on loose papers, budgeting plans and dreams of the future I could almost taste. "You know what? I can do this," I said out loud, savoring the resonance of my own voice. There was something empowering about verbalizing my determination. My parents had finally acknowledged the ramifications of their favoritism over the years. They were trying to make amends, their voices sometimes quivering with a sincerity I had not expected, but still, beneath their apologies lay a lingering nuance of their previous disregard. They acted almost as though I had been a ghost all these years, only now noticing my existence when my brother stumbled through life without their safety net. "Have you spoken to him lately?" my mother asked, standing at the doorway, her silhouette framed by the dusky light. There was a slight tremor in her voice as she shifted her weight between her 2 feet. I glanced up from my papers, squinting against the sunlight catching in the dust motes around us. "Not really," I replied, sliding my pen across the paper, my mind racing with mixed emotions. I felt a strange satisfaction, but also a twinge of sadness. I watched him grapple with the reality of his circumstances. "He seems to be realizing he can't rely on you guys anymore, and honestly, it's painful to see." My mother's brow furrowed, her eyes searching mine as if seeking real understanding. "He made his choices, dear," she said quietly. I caught a hint of remorse in her voice, but also an edge of defensiveness that reminded me of the past, and I had to look away. I pulled my fingers through my hair and sighed. Choices that you have always swooped into cushion. The difference is now that he's learning how to deal with the consequences without the security blanket. I leaned back in my chair, feeling my heart thud loudly in my chest, the truth sparking a sense of validation. I had emerged from the shadows, stronger, more resolute. I refuse to be that person who wallows while you take his side. I won't let our relationship become a hurtful transaction again. Every evening felt weighted with the feelings of injustices I no longer wanted to ignore. I started to see light at the end of my own tunnel, working grudging hours at my job, saving every penny I could, dreaming of a new path, yet struggling within the confines of my family's dynamics. The days stretched into weeks, and I embarked on small adventures of self-discovery, new hobbies, meeting friends, and planning trips. Excitement peppered my mundane existence. One evening, while scrolling through social media, I stumbled upon a post of my brother with his usual bravado glowing through the pixels. He was in a natural park. The sun was setting behind him, showcasing a version of him that seemed untouched by his burdens. Comments rolled in, praises from only a handful of his friends who had not yet turned their backs. My heart twisted with a mix of bitterness and longing. Part of me missed the bond we used to share. "Liar," I muttered under my breath. "You're just working the propaganda crew. No one is buying it." I glanced back at my own reflection in the darkened screen. The confidence I felt flared, even as my brother's performance inked a sort of ache in my chest. Later that week, I stood staring into the bathroom mirror, the weight of my thoughts pressing earnestly on my mind. "This is for you," I whispered to my reflection. I had driven to that park the very next day, wanting to face him directly. The last time we had too many unspoken grudges between us, the air felt thick with previous arguments that layered the tension like sediment. The park was splendid in its simplicity, trees forming a protective canopy overhead. I spotted him sitting on a bench, the sun bearing down, but he seemed seemingly oblivious to the heat. His hands were looped around a coffee cup, and he looked pensive, probably contemplating the next move in his life or perhaps replaying previous decisions like they were an old movie. Reality tugged at my heart as I approached him, nerves fluttering in my stomach. "Hey," I greeted gently, trying to keep my voice steady as I mirrored his stance, taking a seat beside him. "Oh, look who finally decided to show up," he snapped, but there was no fire in his tone, only resignation. "I thought you could use someone to talk to," I said, struggling to each his level of bitterness, careful not to tip the delicate balance of his defenses. "Things aren't easy right now, you know." "Yeah, since when do you care?" The scorn dripped from his words, but I saw a flicker of hesitation behind his eyes. I took a deep breath, willing myself to look beyond the jab. "I care more than you know. You are my brother, after all. I want to help." The environment around us felt charged, and the gentle sounds of the park served as reminders of normality amidst our turmoil. He snorted, bitterness lurking just beneath his perception of my intentions. "Help? You mean like how they helped you all those years, right? Can we skip the blame game for just a moment?" I rubbed my temples, frustration creeping in. "I'm still in this mess because of them, but I chose to fight. You need to do the same, whether you like it or not." I could feel the weight of the conversation shifting, like a scale balancing on the edge. "I know it's rough right now, but you have to face it head on. It is the only way out." "Easy for you to say," he shot back, tiredness finally overtaking his bravado and his shoulders slumped slightly. "You got out of their grasp." "Did I?" I leaned forward, searching his eyes for that hint of connection that remained entangled in our legacy as brothers. "Look, I did it by taking that painful step into honesty. If you don't take responsibility, they will continue to control your life irrespective of what you think you want." It was a risky balance, darting in and out of concern and avoidance. The moment stretched painfully long as he sunk into the shadows of his thoughts. "And what if I don't want to be controlled anymore?" he whispered finally, vulnerability cracking through his anger. "Then you take the reins and steer your life, starting now." My heart swelled with a mixture of hope and caution, the willingness to help shining through each of my words like bright colors spilled from an artist's palette. He turned to me, a glint of interest illuminating the haze of his confusion. "But how do I start? It feels like the ground has crumbled beneath me," he admitted, his voice quieter, more uncertain, like a puzzled child seeking guidance. "I have been saving money and researching different opportunities. You can join me in planning for our futures." Help me start my small business, and I will help you find your path. My own voice grew stronger with each claim. It's not about falling back into their safety nets, but carving out your own. We can bring this family together differently, not under the stretches of favoritism, but mutual respect. I watched as he contemplated, each passing second drumming in synchronized beat with my racing heart. Could hope bring us closer again? Finally, he nodded slightly, but I saw a storm of unresolved issues still brewing behind his eyes. Okay, he finally murmured, not just accepting my offer, but allowing the fragile formation of trust to extend between us. The stiffness in my shoulders broke with a mix of relief against the chorus of cicadas serenading us in the fading light, calming an agitated heart while we stayed connected in that flickering space, filled with possibilities. Although our family had been forever altered, there was a chance we could redefine it, step into the future with courage rather than bitterness. As the sun retreated beyond the horizon, the taste of justice lingered in my mouth, a refreshing breeze washing away years of neglect, while I felt the pull of my newfound freedom. I had faced the ugly truths, turned my suffering into strength, and discovered within me an unwavering reminder that no one should ever feel like they had to hide away in darkness. This journey would not be easy, but the path forward was lit, and I clenched onto the belief that together, my brother and I could navigate through the chaos into something brighter. The first step felt exhilarating, a journey I was ready to embrace by inviting my brother into my newfound world, ready to forge a future built on equality, respect, and understanding.